Rome was not just built on stone, but on a staggering, calculated flow of capital. The greatest military machine of the ancient world conquered an empire, but first it had to conquer the challenge of financing perpetual warfare. For over 1,000 years, from a small republic to a sprawling empire, Roman power was directly proportional to its ability to generate, manage, and deploy vast sums of money. This was not merely about paying soldiers. It was about designing a sophisticated, scalable financial system dedicated almost entirely to war. This system allowed a minor city-state on the Tiber to continuously challenge and eventually subdue every major power in the Mediterranean world. Our story begins in the early Roman Republic, where the state's financial structure was intrinsically linked to the concept of citizenship and military duty. War was initially an amateur, seasonal undertaking, and its funding model was straightforward. The citizenry financed its own defense. Wealthy citizens were expected to provide their own equipment, sometimes even horses, and a system of contributions was put in place to cover the basic costs of a campaign. This primary mechanism was known as the tributum. The tributum was a mandatory war contribution levied upon Roman citizens based on an assessment of their wealth. Crucially, in the earliest days, this was framed not as a tax, but as a repayable loan. The psychological impact of this distinction was immense. Citizens were motivated to fight quickly and decisively, knowing that a successful, profitable victory would generate the cash flow necessary for the state to refund their contributions. The war was literally the mechanism for the citizens' tax refund. This created a powerful financial incentive structure, linking the private wealth of the citizen body directly to the success of the military apparatus. This system worked well as long as Rome was fighting small, localized conflicts against nearby Italian rivals. But as Rome's ambition grew and its wars became longer and more complex, the financial burden shifted dramatically. The greatest genius of the Roman financial system, particularly in the Republican era, lay in the concept of booty, or manubie. The spoils of war were the immediate, highly lucrative lifeblood of the treasury. When a Roman general returned victorious, the plunder, precious metals, currency, grain, and most importantly, slaves and land, was immediately converted into cash. This conversion happened through massive public auctions. The money generated was then deposited into the state treasury, the Aerarium Saturni, located in the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum. This flow of capital created a powerful, virtuous cycle of conquest. A successful war not only secured Rome's borders, but generated the exact cash needed to fund the next campaign, often allowing the state to suspend the tributum altogether. War was not just a political or military goal, it was a self-funding, revenue-generating enterprise. This dynamic became especially important as Rome transitioned to fighting abroad. The campaigns in Spain and Greece, while providing immense wealth, also demanded sophisticated logistical support and required armies to remain in the field for years, not months. The state had to cover the stipendium, or soldiers' pay, and handle the vast supply chain of food, leather, wood, and iron. To manage this complex financial supply chain, Rome relied heavily on private enterprise. These private contractors were known as the publicani. The publicani were powerful syndicates, often composed of wealthy Roman senators and equestrians, who handled virtually all aspects of state finance that the government did not wish to manage directly. They served as tax collectors, customs agents, mine operators, and, critically, military supply contractors. In essence, the Roman state would outsource the risk and labor to these firms. A military commander needing provisions for a legion in Greece would contract a publicanus to handle transport and delivery. In return for their services and the capital they fronted, the publicani were given lucrative contracts,
often gaining the right to collect taxes in newly conquered provinces for a fixed period. This system was rife with corruption and abuse, but it was incredibly effective. It allowed the state to mobilize massive amounts of private capital for public defense, ensuring that campaigns never ground to a halt due to logistical shortfalls.
The true test of the Roman system came with the Punic Wars, particularly the second, existential conflict against Hannibal. This war demanded unprecedented, sustained spending that fundamentally broke the traditional self-funding model. The costs were staggering: the recruitment of dozens of legions, the loss of vast territories and revenues, and the need to maintain fleets and armies for over 17 consecutive years. When the traditional sources of funding dried up, Rome resorted to monetary policy. This was the first great fiscal shock to the Republic. The state's silver reserves, used to mint the denarius, were stretched thin. To fund the immense logistical needs and soldier pay, Rome began a systematic process of coin debasement. Less and less silver was put into each coin, allowing the state to mint more currency from the same amount of metal. While a short-term solution, this inevitably led to inflation. The cost of goods rose as people realized the coins were worth less than their stamps suggested. This marked Rome's first major foray into state-sponsored devaluation to fund war. Beyond debasement, Rome resorted to two other critical measures. First, it demanded extraordinary contributions from its allies, the socii, throughout Italy. These mandated military and financial levies significantly eased the burden on Roman citizens, shifting the cost of the war onto the extended network of Roman influence. Second, Rome introduced a system that functioned as war bonds. Wealthy citizens were compelled, or strongly encouraged, to lend large sums of money to the state to cover immediate critical expenses. Unlike the early tributum, which was often paid back from war spoils, these were genuine loans secured by the long-term faith in Rome's ultimate victory. These loans mobilized the private wealth of the elite to ensure the survival of the state, a clear demonstration of the financial integration of the ruling class.
The final defeat of Carthage brought an economic windfall that fundamentally transformed the Republic forever. The massive indemnities demanded from the Carthaginians, the vast new territories of Spain and Africa, and the flood of cheap grain and slaves into the Roman economy created an economic boom. This influx of capital allowed Rome to permanently abolish the tributum for citizens in Italy around 167 DC. From this point forward, the Roman military was almost entirely funded by the spoils and taxation of conquered peoples, creating a permanent us versus them fiscal policy. This shift was profound. By making war an external, profitable enterprise, the Republic removed the immediate financial burden from its own citizens. This fueled further expansion, as the financial reward for conquest was now guaranteed. The military machine was incentivized to keep fighting, not just for glory, but for the necessary revenue to sustain itself and enrich the Roman elite. The Republic had perfected the art of making its enemies pay for the armies used to subdue them. This complex, evolving structure of taxes, private contracts, strategic borrowing, and above all, the systematic extraction of wealth through conquest was the true foundation of Roman dominance. It was an engine of financial power that made the Roman army the professional, perpetual force that reshaped the ancient world. The sustainability of this model, however, would soon face its greatest challenge, as the wealth pouring into Rome began to destabilize the very political and social structures it was meant to protect.